This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 107 of Here's How for the 13th of August 2020. Demographic change is happening fast in the north, and with it is likely to come constitutional change. I don't think enough people are preparing for that, but in this podcast, I talk to someone who is.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Coming up on today's podcast,
the conversations have to start now in order to educate everybody on the merits of it, on the negatives of it. You know, we have to understand.
It's not the right time. What are the prerequisites, as you would see it, to make the right time for a border poll?
Well, the prerequisites are very simple. You know, I welcome them.
That's coming up shortly. But first, I want to thank all of my donors on Patreon, especially Alan Cran, who signed up as a patron since the last podcast. I really appreciate everyone who does that. For those of you who don't know, Patreon is a system that allows people to donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, and that helps me to devote more time to research and to finding interesting guests. If you think that you could do the same as Alan and the other donors, there's details on the website and at the end of the show. Sinn Féin are calling for a complete ban on co-living. Their housing spokesperson, Eoin Ó Broin, a very talented politician who's been on this podcast before, I'm not sure if those two things are connected, he said, announcing this, that the new housing minister, Darragh O'Brien of Fianna, when he was in opposition, was vehemently opposed to co-living, and he, O'Brien, had challenged his predecessor, Eoin Murphy, and the then Taoiseach, now Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, that if they thought it was acceptable, they should try living in it. In case you're not sure, co-living is basically a student dormitory type arrangement. People get a bedroom of about 12 square metres, about the size of a smallish single bedroom, and they share a kitchen, living room and bathroom facilities in a block with maybe dozens of other residents. I'm pretty sure that Eoin Murphy and Leo Varadkar and Darragh O'Brien, for that matter, would not be interested in that type of accommodation, but to be fair, I don't think that there would be nobody who it would suit. If I was a student or maybe coming to a city to start my first job, it could be quite a sociable way to live. Get the right crowd and you could party every night. That might be quite attractive to some people if it was a cheaper way to get accommodation. But that's the thing, it's not cheap. I'm not clear of his source, but Eoin Ó Broin quoted a price of €1,300 per month for the privilege. Never mind students, if we had a normal functioning housing market, that would be hugely expensive for people in good jobs. There's an international rule of thumb that it's reasonable to spend about a third of your take-home income on rent. A single person in Ireland would need to be grossing €70,000 per year to justify that. The average full-time salary in Ireland is less than $49,000. Queuing for a shared bathroom and trying to squeeze your shift into a single bed might be a viable lifestyle in your early 20s. It's not something that someone aspires to when they are well into their career. And that's the problem with this. Co-living isn't being offered to people who are up for the lifestyle. It's being offered to people who simply can't find or can't afford anything else. And Eoin Ó Broin makes another excellent point about this. Giving permissions for these co-living projects pushes up the price of land. If you can wring $1,300 a month out of someone for every tiny bedroom that you can stack high, why would you go to the bother of building decent housing? Ó Broin is absolutely right that these have the potential to lower the bar for everybody's accommodation. And yet O'Brien's solution is absolutely wrong. He's demanding a change to the Planning Act that basically bans co-living. Why would we ban it? There are some people who would genuinely like that type of accommodation, although I don't think that there's so many of them. But even if they didn't matter, this is not going to solve the housing crisis. It's not going to improve things even a little bit. Sure, developers may, instead of building co-living, build some houses and apartments more suitable for the bulk of the population. But the core housing problem in Ireland is not the type of dwellings we're building. It's that we're building far too few of them, particularly in the centres of our towns and cities, most particularly on brownfield sites in the centre of Dublin. The solution to this that dare not speak its name is simple. It's simple, it works internationally, but Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, the parties of the builders and the landlords, won't do it. The solution is to tax property. If you tax Industry A and you don't tax Industry B, simple logic tells you that you will attract more investment and more economic activity into Industry B at the expense of Industry A. Hoarding land in Ireland is vastly profitable and it attracts basically zero tax. A small number of hugely wealthy individuals are much richer by sitting on vast land banks and keeping them almost entirely off the market, just dripping enough onto the market to keep them in yachts or racehorses or whatever they're into. If that hoarded land was properly taxed, it would cost its owners, not pay them, to keep it vacant. That would push them to sell and accordingly push down the price of land and therefore housing. Ireland is almost unique in the developed world not to have any significant land tax. Instead, we heap all our taxation onto PAYE workers. If there was a plentiful supply of affordable housing, there'd be no need to ban co-living. The only market for it would be people who genuinely wanted to live like that. But Sinn Féin won't say that. People Before Profit won't say that. Nobody in the opposition will call out the government because, for all their demands to tax the rich, they want to stay pretty vague about how they might tax the rich. And in particular, they don't want to tell their voters that they have to push down the value of the voter's house if the voter's kids are to be able to afford a place. There's not too much incentive on the government to stand up to vested interests when the opposition is so careful not to offend them too. And that's why in Ireland you have to be earning 70 grand in order to be properly able to afford to live like a teenager.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
On the line now I have Niall Keenan. Niall is the founder and chairperson of a group called Shared Ireland. Niall, what's that all about?
Hi, William. Pleasure to be speaking to you today. Listen to most of your podcasts. I must say it's a very good platform. And
love the show, Miriam.
and obviously, as a fellow podcaster, we would encourage everybody to be listening to podcasts on a daily, if not weekly basis.
No waffling now, no waffling. Tell me what Shared Ireland is about.
Right. Shared Ireland are a group of like-minded people who have come together. And we are predominantly social media based. We are on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. And we are looking to, I guess, advocate and promote the conversation around our future shared Ireland. Now, basically, to boil that down, what that means is we're looking to have detailed, in-depth conversations about the constitutional future of our island. And we have been, this past 18 months to 2 years, conducting conversations with a wide range of political parties and obviously civic society as well. Anybody that really has got an opinion on our shared future. We are trying to, I suppose, have a conversation about what our future might look like. What do we need to do now in order to help shape that? And obviously we have spoke to Jeffrey Donaldson from the DUP, who I guess would not have our thinking. Jeffrey is a proud unionist. And
to be clear, you guys are nationalist and you don't make any bones about that.
No, we are advocating in any future referendum or border poll, we will be advocating a yes vote. However, we do not want to see a border poll until there has been a proper, detailed conversation. Because if we look back to 2016, William, and the perfect example here is the Brexit vote, where genuinely thousands of people went to the ballot box without the proper, detailed information to know, will I vote yes or will I vote no? And we simply are saying loud and clear to anybody, including the British and Irish government, that we cannot afford to make them same mistakes. A detailed conversation now in preparation for any future border poll is a pragmatic approach.
Okay, I think actually what you're doing is very, very important, and you're in a very, very underserved market, to use that lingo, because there is provision in the Good Friday Agreement for a border poll, as you put it. And if you look at the Ashcroft polling, which I think nobody really expected that to happen as fast as it has. And late last year, there was a majority in an opinion poll, only in an opinion poll, but it's a seismic shift nonetheless, with 51% saying they would rather, 51% of people in the North saying they would rather join the Republic than stay in the UK. But the real devil is in the detail, in that if you look at the demographic breakdown, for people over 65, there's a strong unionist majority. By the time you get to middle age, it's 50-50. But in younger voters, that's to say anybody under 44, there's a very strong nationalist majority. And of course, as the years go by, those people get older and the older people die off and younger people come into the voting cohort. This is barreling down the track at us very quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, but I suppose in the terms that you're only after describing it there, William, while that poll and that you quoted the figures there accurately, but this isn't simply about, outbreeding somebody, nothing could be further from the truth. This is about getting the proper shared Ireland in the future that we all feel comfortable in. This is about fleshing out, what a new Ireland will look like here. This isn't simply about adding our numbers up and hoping that we've got 50.1% and we will get a united Ireland. That would be a cosmetic approach to this, and it wouldn't be sustainable.
What's your thought? What's your thought about what Seamus Mallon said, that even if 50% was exceeded on the nationalist side, that perhaps reunification shouldn't proceed?
Well, obviously, I respect Seamus as a politician, and unfortunately, Seamus and his colleague John Hume are no longer with us. But I totally disagree with Seamus's analysis on that, because put quite frankly, William, if 50.1% was good enough for Brexit and all other referendums, well then you can't start moving the goalposts now just because it may suit a particular narrative. It is what it is. But in an ideal world, of course, every pro-United Irelander would like to win this future border poll with 70%. Of course we would, because that means it will be more stable moving forward. And this is the key to this, stable. Because that's why now we need to do the groundwork. We've got civic groups like Ireland's Future. We've got our own group, Shared Ireland. There's other groups out there like Think 32. And we've got Professor Colin Harvey. And we've got a lot of, smart, educated people here that want to have this conversation. And with the greatest of respect, I seen something that Arlene Foster said last week, that she believes if there was a border poll, that the union would be safe. Well, what I would respectfully say back to Arlene, if that's the case, simply, why not test your theory then? If you're that confident,
Do you think it would be wise to go ahead with it this year or next year?
No, that's what I said at the start of this conversation, if you remember, William.
Yep.
We believe now is not, and I repeat, not the right time. And we're currently speaking here late 2020. So, the planning, the conversations have to start now in order to educate everybody on, and I will admit this, on the merits of it, on the negatives of it. We have to understand.
It's not the right time. What are the prerequisites, as you would see it, to make the right time for a border poll?
Well, the prerequisites are very simple. I welcome the recent establishment. Well, it hasn't started yet, but there's talk about Micheál Martin and the new coalition Irish government in the 26 counties setting up this shared island unit. So this is positive news, but it's only positive news if it's not lip service. And what I mean by that is there has to be something tangible at the end of this. There has to be proper. Well, first of all, the unit must be set up. That's the first thing. I'm assuming there has to be a head appointed to the department. And then that particular person or whoever's going to control it has to get in touch with political parties. But here's the key, William. We believe that civic society must have a stake in this conversation. Because, civic society are the people that's going to be voting here.
What sort of things do you see happening?
Well, what I would like to see happening is this. I would like to see everybody entering into a series of meetings. And I would like to see everybody coming into these meetings with an open mind. And there's one word in particular I'm going to use here, William, and it's the word compromise. Compromise has to be in the back of everybody's mind here. We're all not going to get everything our wish list. So we have to be prepared to compromise on this. If you walk in to buy a new car tomorrow morning, you're not just going to pay the exact price that the car dealership's looking for. There's a wee bit of to and fro, and this is no different. And it really isn't. And I'm not comparing this to buying a car. Obviously it's a lot more serious subject. But everybody must walk away from every negotiation feeling as if that they've got something,
Yeah, but to firm that up, Niall, what would you offer somebody, for example, Jeffrey Donaldson, to say a united Ireland wouldn't be all that bad because we will give up what?
You see, it's not about what I will give up. And I am in no position.
What would you compromise on that you might not like to compromise on, but you would be willing?
You see, as I was saying, William, it's not what I would give up. And I am in no position to speak on behalf of all the pro-United Irelanders.
No, but you can talk for yourself.
But what I am happy to say is this, is it's not until Jeffrey and whoever, for example, you used me as an example. So if me and Jeffrey and others entered this room, well then, it would be listening to each other. It would be saying, Jeffrey, what do you hold holy in the union? And I would be saying, okay, can I guarantee you that in a new Ireland? And, Alex Keenan wrote a piece a couple of months ago about, putting the 12th of July as a national holiday and being allowed to march wherever they want and stuff. He called that tokenism. And I can see where Alex is coming from there. But what I would respectfully say to Alex is this, there's nothing tokenism about it. If they were to be two examples, this is about living together. This is about realising there is two main traditions in this island. And there are others, by the way. And it's about respect. And it's about trying to walk a mile in the other person's shoes here. But to sum up this point, William, it's about, I can't say what I would, as you put it, give up or what Jeffrey would demand. It's about sitting down, first of all, and listening to each other and building up a level of respect for each other and a rapport with each other and trying to actively listen and understand where the other community is coming from. So to sum up, this is that it's impossible for me to say what he or she would give up until these conversations start.
South of the border, we've had citizens' assemblies, notably on the abortion referendum before that and before the marriage equality referendum. Do you think it would be worth doing that, particularly in the north or perhaps across the whole island?
This has to be an all-island approach. It genuinely does. There's no point us sitting in the north here having a citizens' assembly about our future constitutional arrangements and the equivalent happening in the south. This has to be a joined approach.
And would you like a citizens' assembly in principle?
Absolutely. That's what we've been calling for from, many's a year now. We want the citizens' assembly facilitated by the Irish government, British government, and to plan and prepare and talk about our future. Not even for our sake, but for our next generation, because we have got an onus to ensure that our future generations do not have to be having these conversations.
Should the Irish government go ahead with a citizens' assembly if the Westminster government won't play ball?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, the Irish government is what it says in the tin. It's the Irish government. We are living in Ireland here. And, the onus is on the Irish government here as joint co-guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement to live up to the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. And let's not forget, the principles of the Good Friday Agreement is all that we are talking about here. There is a will for this conversation to happen. And just because a certain section of the population don't want to have it, it doesn't mean to say it isn't the right one to have. We've been living in the Union now for 100 years. And I'm just going to call a spade here, William. That union has not worked for all sections of the population. And I think that's been well documented.
Well, you've been in it for 220 years, but I understand what you're saying. But my question then is, having, as you're trying to do, talk to people right across society, having talked to various unionists, what's your own personal feeling of the degree to which they would say, okay, maybe some things we have to happen that we don't like, but we would be willing to compromise? Do you get a sense that there is a willingness there?
Absolutely, there is, William. We have spoke to Mike Nesbitt, for example, ex-leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. And Mike is a very rational, pragmatic man. And he realises that we're not living in 1950 or 1970 any longer. He sees the writing is on the wall. So it's either jump on the train and have a stake in your future, or bury your head in the sand and let the future happen anyway, and you have no say in it. And Mike sees that. There's other people like Alex Keenan, who, by the way, all these people would rather maintain the union, but at least they're pragmatic enough to realise that change is happening. So they might as well get in there and try and influence this change for the betterment, as they would see it, their own community. And, you've got people like Naomi Long, you've got... There's people out there willing to have conversations, but then obviously you've got the die-hard people on both traditions, I will say, that you will never convince them. And that's why, people talk about this floating vote of 20-30% possibly of the Alliance voters, Green voters, independents. This is going to be key for us moving down the line here to try and convince these people. And I suppose nowadays, how you convince people of anything is convince them in their pocket. How will it benefit them financially? How will their family have a better lifestyle? And I suppose, looking at this very simplistically, and I do accept that, when you've got dual services on a small island with a population of 6.4, 6.5 million, you have 2 police services, you have 2 education services, you have 2 health services, it says sheer and utter madness. So to streamline everything, to be inclusive, to have an all-Ireland approach. If you look at the foot and mouth disease, William, back in, when was it, 2001, 2002, there was an all-Ireland approach. We stamped that out within weeks. At the COVID thing here, there has been pockets of all-Ireland approaches. But, it's frankly, there's a lot to be improved on, because at one stage, if you had COVID in Lifford in County Donegal, you were told to self-isolate for 14 days. But if you walked across to the Lifford Bridge, literally it took you 30 seconds, and you were in the north of Ireland, you were told to self-isolate for 7 days. So we things like this in a small island where there's daily interaction between the communities across the so-called border, we need a bit of joined up thinking here.
Okay, and you've anticipated my next question, because you mentioned about convincing people in their pocket. And you've said correctly that there's different standards and different levels on each side of the border. And for example, in the north, there's the NHS, which I think everybody would agree is, even in its current state, is working better than the ragtag of a health service put together in the south. And for example, in the south, students get free fees and get, university the costs are much lower. Isn't there going to be a pressure to level up all across the board? That could get to be very expensive, couldn't it?
You see, you've got two, as I pointed out, and as you rightfully said, you've got two of everything in this island, So what we are simply saying, and this might sound very idyllic, but like what you do here is you look around the world and you look at other health systems, just to focus on health here, and you look at the Swedish model, for example, which is recognised throughout the world as being a fairly decent one. You look at the NHS, you look at the equivalent in the south, and you try and take little bits and pieces of them all that work. And what we do here is we design our own system to suit our own needs. This doesn't have to be, a one system fits all approach. You said there that the NHS is accepted of being, good. Talk to my daughter.
I said better, not good, but I'll take your point.
Sorry. Yeah, my daughter's an NHS nurse. I can tell you this now. When she comes home in the evenings, and I won't go into it, but she would have a different story for you. Underfunded, not paid to the same level as our counterparts in England, Scotland and Wales. That's a fact. So looking at something from, just without drilling down into it, anything can look better. As I say, in this faraway field look great. There's elements of every system that are good and bad. But what we have to do here, and again, I go back to my main mantra here, is we have to sit down, and that's why we need to discuss these things, flesh them out, see how you would fund these things. Would the EU contribute to a new Ireland for the first 5 or 10 years? When Britain would withdraw, ultimately, I'm talking about the British government here, they would put a funding package in place. Would America put money into, a new island as well? So, there's ways of doing this, and that's what we're looking to do, is sit down and flesh these questions out. And, there can be no predetermined outcome before a conversation begins. And I totally accept that. And that would be one of the criticisms that I guess loyalism and unionism would have about pro-United Ireland. So they would say, all you want to do is talk about a border pull. Absolutely not. All I want to do is talk about our future shared Ireland here.
To focus on loyalists, and particularly maybe more hardline loyalists for the moment, as you're aware, in the 1980s and 1990s, Sinn Féin were only getting about 10% of the total vote in Northern Ireland. Even the overwhelming majority of nationalists would have been voting against Sinn Féin. Nevertheless, with that level of support, they were able to, on the IRA side, they were able to essentially cause mayhem in the society and make Northern Ireland perhaps not ungovernable, but essentially impossible to function as a state. If just one loyalist in 5, for example, was willing to say, we will not accept anything, we will fight reunification tooth and nail, even if you've persuaded 80% of loyalists, it would only take a relatively small number to make life impossible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's quite true. And again, I go back to what I've been saying all along here in this conversation, William. This is another subject that needs to be talked about in these conversations that we're advocating should start now. Mm-hmm. Security is a strong element that must be discussed. So, in this Citizens' Assembly, in this new shared island unit that the Irish government are proposing to set up, we need to be talking about policing. We need to be talking about security. We need to be talking about education, health, infrastructure. So, this isn't just one subject that we have to talk about here. Mm-hmm. And as you rightfully pointed out, there's going to be elements, as we see here, and, I don't like calling, putting a tag name on anybody, but you see that even with elements of dissident republicanism here, so you would have the same, I imagine, with sections of loyalist community. If there was a United Ireland tomorrow morning, absolutely, I accept that fact. But again, what we have to do is have conversations with these people as well now. These people need to be spoke to as well. There's no point the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, Sinn Féin, DUP, UUP and the SDLP Alliance and the Greens and whoever sitting down having a cosy conversation and carving something up. We need to get down into the trenches here, to put it bluntly. And that's why civic society is key to this. Republicans are key to this. Loyalists are key to this. Nationalists and unionists and others that, don't have any, wouldn't want to be tagged with any of them names, have to be involved in this. This has to be an inclusive process moving forward. And what I am saying quite clearly here, and I will continue to say this, is there is no point talking about this with 6 months before any future border poll. We would be rightfully laughed at around the world. And, this has to be a detailed, inclusive process that starts now. Talking about what you're only after talking about, that will be an element of it. How will we combat any future potential violence down the road from either quarter, by the way? Not just
do you get exasperated? Do you get exasperated now? Because I do, that there's a relatively small number of people who are talking like you are, and I think there's a very low
number of people, William.
A relatively small number of
people.
Are you
serious?
In the conciliatory way that you are, I think a huge number of people, both in the north and the south, are oblivious to just how fast the demographics are changing. And it's not just outbreeding, because there's a very strong tendency of particularly well-educated young Protestant stroke loyalist stroke unionists, whatever you want to call them, emigrating and particularly going to university in Britain and not returning. And that's making the demographics change even faster. But even if nothing happened, just that age profile of the population in Northern Ireland would very, very quickly mean that nationalists substantially outnumber unionists. Are you frustrated that nobody else is banging the drum that you're talking about?
Well, you see, I, with respect, I believe a lot of people are banging the drum that I'm talking about. We'll just take one element of what I'm talking about, and that is trying to shape a better future here. And, I believe this is something that we have in common. Everybody on this island has got that one thing in common. I'm assuming that. I would like to believe that anyway, that we want a better future for ourselves, but more importantly, and I genuinely, sincerely mean this, for my children and my future grandchildren. That's my motivation in this. So that they did not have to live through what many of us did, and as you referred to there a couple of minutes ago, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where there was people getting blown up and shot and murdered on all sides, by all sides, including the British government here on a daily basis. This is my motivating factor here. And, so you're on about emigration there. Of course, like if you look at Australia, I'm from County Tyrone, and there's actually football teams, local football teams in the area that are struggling to field a team. Do you know why? Because most of their players are in Australia. So we need to encourage these people to come back. And while I understand, I have 2 daughters living in Australia, and it's good to see them go, broaden their horizons. But, we need to have something tangible for them to come back to. We need to encourage them back. We need to say, for example, my daughter that I refer to is a nurse. Like, why is she getting paid over £2,000 less than her equivalent in England, Scotland and Wales? Why? What sort of a message does that send out? So we have to shape our future here and pay the proper wages to our trained frontline staff and others. So this conversation, as I go back to what I always say, this isn't a sticky plaster. This isn't a 5-minute conversation. This is going to take years of detailed planning. It's as simple as that. So why not start it now?
And do you think you're getting traction?
Absolutely, we are. Absolutely. The whole border poll, the whole United Ireland project is become mainstream. No longer is it a dirty word that you have to skulk about in the back rooms of bars and speak about,
One other very brief question, because I'm going to be talking to somebody from the Scottish National Party in a future podcast, hopefully. Those two things, Irish reunification and Scottish independence, are really very separate questions, but they are linked in that if either happened, the degree of instability would very quickly trigger the other.
Yeah, well, both of them, as you say, are separate, but they have got a crossover. And the crossover is that the union will basically cease to be the union anymore. Mm-hmm. And I have no wish, I wish anybody that wants to remain in the union, I wish them well. But, there is Scottish independence, they had the NDRF, obviously that was unsuccessful. I believe what I am hearing behind the scenes, they're doing the homework, learning from the mistakes of the first one, and they're slowly but surely putting that right. And the next one, I think everybody is accepting that it will be a close run affair.
And the polls are certainly looking better for the pro-independence people.
Absolutely. And, we have to do the same here. But again, this isn't about pushing my desires onto another community. I don't want to revisit the past only from a different perspective. So we need to, basically say to the unionism, come you on board and be part of this new government. Stand up for your people. Demand your rights. Because an Ireland without rights for everybody isn't the Ireland that I want to live on.
Niall Keenan, founder and chairperson of Shared Ireland. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks, William.
If you like the Here's How podcast, please rate and review the show on iTunes and other podcast providers. Share it on Facebook and Twitter. Tell your friends. But most of all, make your views heard. Call us on 076 603 5060.
Go to the website for sources and references from the show, and while you're there, you can like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter at Here's How Podcast, and follow Shared Ireland at Shared Ireland, and get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or a topic for a future show. Thanks again to Alan and all the other patrons on Patreon. Their donations allow me to devote time to research and finding interesting guests. And if you could do the same as them and donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, go to patreon.com/here's how. That link is on the website, and you can find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. All that information is at www.here'show.ie. The next show will be uploaded next Thursday, the 20th of August. I'll be talking to the Scottish National Party MP, Alan Smith. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.